Oh, hello, hello. Yes, here I am live again. Can you believe it? As always, just double checking notifications. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing great. Oh, it looks like I'm live. Let's double check. You know, as I always say, I'm a one-man band here, so I just like to double check. There I am. Yes, lovely. Perfect. Hello, everyone, and happy Tuesday from a very, very cold, snow-covered palatial estate here in Collingwood, Ontario, Canada. I'm about 2 hours north of Toronto, but ooh, it feels like I might as well be up in the Northwest Territories or something like that. It is really cold here. And when I flip around my camera, I'll show you I'm in a back split. My house is a back split. So I'm in the lower level, not quite the basement, but 4 feet is in the basement kind of thing. But I have 4 feet above me. I've got nice big windows. I can't see out the window. There's so much snow. So as I always say, let's just stay inside and sew. So hello, Shirley. Hello. It is great to see you all today. My name is Michael Smith. I'm the National Education Manager of Janome Canada, and I'm thrilled to be back here in Janome Sewing Machines Facebook page live. And again, Janome Canada Facebook page live. But if you don't have Facebook, then yes, you can view these presentations live on our Janome HQ YouTube channel. That's Janome Canada's YouTube, or Janome America's YouTube as well. So no matter where you are in the world, then you can share in the Janome love. Oh, and my sister Deb is here. Lovely. Yes, again, frigid everywhere. Everybody is saying it is cold. I agree. Let's just stay inside, keep our machines warm, and keep ourselves warm. So for the live today, as always, I have lots to share. Flip around my camera here to show you. There we go. I'm on my fabulous, let's wake it up here, fabulous 550E again today. And then there is my window. Do you see, like, you can barely see daylight out there. I've got about 4 feet of snow or more outside. So again, I'm just happy to stay inside with my fabulous Janome machine to talk about threading and threads in particular. And so many times people say, oh, my machine doesn't like this thread and my machine doesn't like that thread. Your machine is a machine. It doesn't really know the kind of thread other than quality of thread, for example. So let's stick to good quality thread. If it's, 3 for 99 cents at the craft store, just keep going. If you've got grandma's beautiful wooden spools, remember, for those of us who have been sewing long enough, or again, grew up in a household where, maybe our mom or our grandma was sewing, and we've got these beautiful wooden spools, and we don't want to see it go to waste, but these are so old. Thread, in particular, cotton threads, the way that they all used to be way back when, cotton's a natural man-made or a natural fiber. It will lose moisture over time. So if your thread is on a wooden spool, you can do other decorative projects with this, the spools, do a garland around your Christmas tree, something like that. Do not use these in your machine. This thread, particularly, again, cotton thread, is going to be so brittle and so old, it's just going to break. You're going to have so much trouble, and you're going to blame your machine. It is not your machine, it's the thread. So old thread like these beautiful wooden spools, do not use them. Your thread as well, we want to keep it out of direct sunlight. That sunlight can break down our thread. So I'll show you right here next to my machine here. Ooh, I have this fabulous. This is normally for machinists, to keep all their tools in, wrenches and screwdrivers and everything. Well, this is what I love. I have my Janome embroidery thread in here. Isn't that gorgeous? All beautifully, ooh, all beautiful laid out. So keeping your thread, boom, even more, keeping your thread in a drawer away from a cabinet, away from direct sunlight is also going to help. We don't want again, light to make our thread brittle and to break it down. So we definitely need to preserve the thread, and particularly cotton thread, given it is again, natural fiber, it will lose moisture over time. So good quality thread is what we want to start with. Now here for our embroidery machine specifically, as we're in National Embroidery Month, Did you know Janome has 1, 2, 3 sets of embroidery thread, polyester embroidery thread. Now we say this is all embroidery thread, but again, we can use this thread for anything, particularly decorative stitches. I love using this embroidery thread since it's so lustrous. It's very beautiful. But you'll see all the colors in here. There's all the color charts. So then this is how we know the colors of our Janome embroideries. There they are, there, color like 201, for example, and I look up here, oh, it's pink. So all of our embroidery, regardless of what Janome embroidery machine you have, all of the numbers refer to this Janome thread palette. So double check with your Janome dealer. There's 1, 2, 3 collections of embroidery thread. It just makes doing embroidery so easy because there, all of the designs that are built into all of our Janome machines were created with that Janome thread palette. Now you can use any other palette of thread, but again, it's just Janome. It just makes it easy. So that is good. So again, any type of thread is fine. Now, again, for this beautiful, luxurious thread, we say embroidery thread, but yes, I love using this for decorative stitches, for example. It just makes them stand out even better. Now, you'll see the weight here, that number 50, for example. You may wonder what on the top of the spools of thread, there will sometimes be this number, and that refers to the weight of the thread. Basically the thickness of the thread. Now, thread is very weird in that the lower the number, the thicker the thread. The higher the number, the thinner the thread. So this is a 50 weight polyester thread. Again, it's got beautiful sheen, so great for decorative stitches, even ruler quilting, free motion quilting. I love using this embroidery thread because of that luxurious sheen. And again, polyester being a man-made fiber is stronger. It's like basically one long filament is a stronger fiber than cotton, for example. So that's why we like using it for embroidery. Again, it's got that beautiful luster, and then it's generally stronger. So for free motion quilting, ruler quilting, it works great. So this 50 weight is like an average weight of thread. But then we can get into, oh yes, more different weights of thread. For example, this is an 80 weight thread. It is very fine thread. So if we were to do a lot of dense free motion quilting, for example, this 80 weight thread, we may not even really see the color of the thread so much based on the color of our fabric or the thickness, the pile of our fabric. If it was on like a terry cloth, for example, this thread would just bury right into that terry cloth. We wouldn't even see it. But this 80 weight thread is a very fine thread. So if we want to do, again, free motion quilting would be great. Or here in our embroidery machine, if we're doing very small fonts, very small letters, very tiny little micro designs, very dense designs, maybe we want to use, instead of the thicker 50 weight thread, maybe we'll use an 80 weight thread so the thread won't take up as much room in that design, especially if it's a really dense design. Or again, free motion quilting, we'll see a lot of dimension of the quilting. We won't necessarily see the color of the thread. So thread weight, go on to, again, any website really that, go to, ask your Janome dealer all about different weights of thread. And again, we can use any different types. They all have a specific purpose in mind, and then you just play and experiment. This thread, for example, is typically called jeans thread because of the colors. Mainly that this is often like the colors that we use in the tops manufacturers use in the top stitching of jeans, for example. This will be a 28 or a 30 weight thread. So again, thread is weird in that the higher the number, the thicker the thread. So we started with a average good 50 weight, a lighter weight thread. This is an 80 weight. That's really light. We can even go down to a 100 weight thread. That's really, really light. So most embroidery thread is 40 weight. Yes, correct. And Janome's is slightly thinner at 50 weight. So our average sewing thread is 40 weight. Your most polyester or polyester cotton blend thread is a 40 weight, and most embroidery thread is as well. Janome does make theirs a little extra finer of 50 weight. So again, lots available. So this is a 28 or 30 weight thread is thicker. So this we typically wouldn't really be doing in the embroidery machine. This would be great again for top stitching in your sewing machine, specifically the jeans or any home deck project. It's again thicker thread. This one is this is what, polyester thread, 100% polyester thread. Could be cotton as well, either or, but it's just again a thicker thread because there's more strands wound into it. Thread is usually a 2-ply or a 3-ply, so 2-ply or 3-ply thread to make it thicker. Most embroidery thread is 2-ply. And then most regular thread is 3-ply. So again, this would be a good thicker thread for your home deck projects or again, top stitching. And then yes, most other thread is, again, this is some beautiful multicolor Madeira thread, and this is a 40 weight thread. Now you can go on, in this case, it's Madeira. You would go on Madeira's website to read more about the thread weights, or again, you purchase this from your Janome dealer and you ask them, or you look at the packaging that will tell you. There's usually, again, an insert or a write-up here about the thread weight, but most average thread is 40 weight. Maybe you can see it right here on the end, number 40. That's what that number means. It's a 40 weight thread. All these wonderful neon bright threads. So double check with your Janome dealer. Any of these threads, and even, oh yes, this is beautiful neon, poly-neon multicolor thread. There's also a multicolor thread that is cotton thread. Now, yes, we can embroider with cotton thread as well. It doesn't have to be polyester. Rayon is another popular choice for embroidery machines. Typically, they are 40 weight, 2-ply thread. So again, rayon, cotton, polyester, we can embroider with it, we can sew with it, we can do decorative stitches with it. It's whatever kind of look you want. You just play and experiment. So when we get into then different weights of thread and different types of thread, as you'll see in the back of my machine here, when we go to thread our machine, boom, let me raise this up. When we go to thread our machine, certain products like these thread stands, I've mentioned many times before, and I'll mention many times again, because boy, do they really make a difference. The thread stand will either screw in, you'll see the screw holes, screw into the back of your machine, and your machine, if it will accept a thread stand, then you can, it'll just screw into the back of your machine. But you'll see here on my 550E, I just clip it right onto my handle. I don't even need to screw it into the back of the machine. I just clip it on the handle and it works beautifully. But why I love the thread stand in particular, again, look at this beautiful telescoping thread mast here. So we have more room to this thread to uncurl and unwind before we get down into the tensions. Specifically, when we get into these threads that are a little bit trickier, this one is not even a real thread. It is mylar. It's like a really thin piece of like plastic, essentially. And we can use some of these fabulous decorative threads and metallic threads in our embroidery machine, in our sewing machine, but they just need a little bit of extra care and attention. Yes, exactly, but it is on the handle. Yes, instead of screwing in the thread stand into the back of the machine, I just clipped it on the handle. These, again, metallic threads, these more finicky threads, as I call them, they need some extra attention. So your thread stand is going to make all the difference in the world on the back of your machine. Now, you'll see the packaging here is the thread stand. Janome's had a 2-spool stand, or this is a 5-spool stand. Now, this is a very old packaging. You'll see it says Memory Craft 11,000. Well, that's a very old machine, but oh, look, that thread stand is exactly the same. It just has a different part number, but it's exactly the same as the one clipped into the back of my machine, again, with that beautiful telescoping thread mast. And the cool thing is, so even if at your Janome dealer, and if it says things like Memory Craft 11,000, well, this will perfectly fit with any other machine. There's the holes, you know, for the screws. So don't worry so much about, it's not compatible with my machine. It'll screw into the back of the machine just fine. It's just, this was manufactured when the 11,000 was out, and then other machines came afterward, but it still works just beautifully. So double check with your dealer what thread stands they have for you. And the cool thing, all of our thread stands come with these extra big, large spool caps, and they come with spool adapters, so cone adapters, so things like this big Madeira Arrow quilt thread, great for our long arm quilting machines. It is polyester, 100% polyester, but it looks like cotton. So great to use in the long arm quilting machines, our Quiltmaker Pro machines, because of that tall cone. But here with these cone adapters of our thread stands, we can use these tall cones of threads on our sewing machines, especially for embroidery if we would like, or again, ruler quilting, free motion quilting. I love using this Arrow quilt thread. It's again polyester, but it looks like cotton because it's more dull. It's not so shiny. So that's an option. So these cone adapters work great with our thread stands, come included. The large spool caps, for example. And you'll see how I use the extra spool caps. I create basically a little shelf. So for these finicky threads, anything with a small, short little spool, I like to make these spool caps like a little shelf. And then I put the spool of thread on it. So I'm completely bypassing the spool pin. When we get into trouble with our machine, when it jams and the bobbin holder spins, it's not the machine, it's usually the thread wraps around the spool pin, either below the spool or above the spool. So that's why I love making this large spool cap on top of the spool. It's going to completely bypass, completely bypass, look at that, completely bypass that spool pin, but also by inverting that spool cap to make it like a little shelf, we've bypassed that spool pin as well. There is no way this thread is going to jam. Now I've gone one step further in this, again, for metallic thread and this mylar thread. These the thread nets come in the spool stand packaging, but as well they're in a separate blister pack. And we just wrap the net around so it goes to the bottom of the spool here. And then this is what's going to help prevent, we just tuck it into the bottom of the spool, and that's what's going to help prevent the puddling. Some of this thread, again, there's so much thread round around these spools, and some it just puddles right off. So this way, by having that thread net, it eliminates that puddling at the bottom. So maybe if your machine jams and you look up here, oh, my threading is totally fine. It's maybe the thread is wrapped around the bottom of the spool pin. So double check. Now you'll see again, because of the telescoping thread mast here, all of this thread is so curly. So by having that extra distance for the thread to unwind before it gets to the tension, we resolve a lot of those thread breaks, a lot of the threading issues. Now, when we get into actually threading the machine though, now here in the 550E, double check your instruction manual in all of your machines. Again, I'm reluctant to get too close because my phone goes a little weird. But you will see when you follow your instruction manuals, there are times when, like here in the 550E, for example, there's like a little notch at the back of the machine, right there, the little thread guide. And then normally the instructions just say, well, we loop the thread around this guide. Well, there's a little hole here in this threading guide, this little hole right in there. And again, if you have the 550 or 500E, 550E, 550 ELE, you will see that little hole. This hole also applies to the thread stand that is on the CM17, for example, and our sergers, they have a little hole in the telescoping thread mast. And that is for if we're sewing and, you know, sewing at high speeds, embroidering at high speeds. And sometimes this thread, you know, is going high speed and it just dances out of the guides. So by having that little hole there, we can loop the thread around as it suggests in the manual. And then I do this again for these difficult threads sometimes. Then if I can get that thread through the hole, this is where I need maybe some glasses. There we go. So I loop it around as typical, put it through the hole, then loop it around. So again, no matter how fast I'm stitching and my thread, the twist of the thread, it's not going to come away from this guide because I put the thread through the hole. So little tips like that. And again, if you have a CM17, if you have a serger then, and it's got that little hole in your thread mast, the little hole is there just to prevent your thread from dancing out of your thread guides there. What machine do you have? Oh, this is the fabulous 550E standalone embroidery machine. And then now when we continue our thread path, as we're doing our threading tips, regardless of what machine, once we have the thread here in the guide, at the top of the machine, again, check with your instruction manual. They all have these numbered guides and diagrams to tell you where to go, what to do with this thread. I like two-handed threading. Now I stop. I have a whole big line of thread here that I know is going to get down to the needle. I put my hand up here at the top so no more thread is coming off this spool. I go down and up to the take-up lever. Now, if we have a machine, a regular sewing machine with needle down and up, we click so the take-up lever is in the highest position. And when we go to put the thread in the take-up lever, do you see by having my finger up here of my right hand stopping the thread from coming off the cone or the spool of thread, I can tug with my left hand. I can tug that thread to make sure it's to the front of that take-up lever. A lot of times when people do the one-handed threading so quick and they don't always pull that thread to the front of the take-up lever. And then if your machine jams, the first thing I do is check the take-up lever. Has the thread come out of the take-up lever? Now, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to remove my right finger here, but normally I keep my right finger there the entire time, the rest of the way through threading. So, let me remove or drop this down. So many things to show. Now, before I get down to the needle threader, I'll say things like, oh yes, you see my medium-sized spool cap here. Using the correct size spool cap makes all the difference. The spool cap needs to be larger than the top of the spool. I don't worry about the base, I just worry about the top. So again, for these fatter spools back here of the Janome polyester embroidery thread, I would definitely use this big guy, because again, that thread has bypassed the spool pin. On this iris, the king cone, the medium size works well as well. For again, horizontally, as you see, or vertically, it works beautifully. Now, in some machines, we have the special spool cap, or again, it's available in a separate blister pack. I sometimes see it like this, but that's more like, I say, a crown. How that special spool cap works, it goes inside the spool like this. So you just see the top of the spool. That's how it's supposed to go. And specifically, it's for the horizontal orientations, where again, these horizontal spool pins aren't necessarily long enough for these long cones, these long like mini king cones. So that's where this special spool cap comes in like that. So that way the spool stays on and it is not going to wrap around the spool pin. And just a quick little tip, do you know too, when we're putting our spool on, a lot of times I see people put on the spool cap so tight. We want to have room so that thread and that spool itself can move. We don't want this so tight that the spool can't rotate at all. I just go tight and then I back it off a little bit just so it can roll around a little more. And also one last little tip here. I've got so many things to show, and as usual, I'm running out of time. Because thread is such a big issue. Sometimes have you felt, not on these Janome threads, I must admit, sometimes on the thread, the little notch that's on the side of your spool of where the thread will like notch into to click into. Now here in our Janome thread, it just wraps around like inside here, inside this groove. So there is no little notch. But in some brands of thread, there's a little notch here where your thread hangs up that you know that's the end of the thread. And I find as I'm stitching, my thread will catch on that little notch. I take a little emery board. Clearly, I don't use it for my nails. I use the emery board and I file off if there is that little nick. And sometimes it catches the thread. So you just file that off and make it smooth. So when you're stitching, the thread's not going to get caught up on it. Again, I've never had the problem with Iris and Madeira and Janome thread. I generally stick with the thread that I know, but again, for other brands, sometimes I have had that, so that will make a difference. Just filing that down a little bit. So again, when we get down here, as we're using our built-in needle threader, and again, we've got our right hand up at the top, we pulled the thread through the take-up lever. Now, when I'm going down, and we follow the guides on our machine, and we again double check our instruction manual. Now when we get up to again things like thread guide number 7, we're created to, oh, I pull my thread all the way to the left. There is a groove, what often people miss. There is a groove to the left-hand side in most machines, not every machine, but most machines, there's a groove to the left. We want that thread all the way to the left. Then there are these little jaws, as I call them, a little jaw, and we want the thread right into that jaw. Then it goes over, in this case, thread guide number 7, and then we can hang our thread up here to the side of the machine. On the side of almost every Janome machine is a thread cutter. From back to front is a thread cutter. From front to back is a thread holder. So we can just hold up our thread there. And then when we go to thread the machine, in many cases, our instruction manual tells us to lock the machine. And what I love about that, specifically for the 500E, 550E, 550 ELE, I locked my machine, but oh, I don't really see this icon that I want to see before I thread my machine. And why I don't see that icon is my foot was still up. My presser foot was still up. Now that I've dropped my foot, oh, look there. Do you see that little needle icon? And it says, okay. So the machine is telling me that my needle is in the correct position. Now, even if I had my foot down, and let me rotate the balance wheel. See, I just rotated my balance wheel a little bit. My needle's a little too low. That icon disappeared. So the wonderful thing about a lot of the new generation Janome machines, the higher end Janome machines, again, why do we spend so much money on these machines? They really do a lot of that thinking for us, and they really do try to make it easier for us to get successful results. Again, for the needle threader in particular, lock your machine, drop your foot, or in some machines it happens manual or automatically. And again, here on the 500E, 550E, 550 ELE, that little icon of the needle and says, okay, we want to see that before we engage the needle threader. And then one big swoop, boom, there it is, live on air in front of you. I raise my foot so I can pull this thread through, and now I'm done. It's so good. It is so easy. Now, when we get about needles, and again, we'll go very quickly, needles make all the difference. So our needle threaders, oh, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Are you using Janome branded needles? Our blue tip size 11 or red tip size 14? or purple tip, size 14, again with that flared cobra head. Lots of information on Janome Life blog. Go to our respective Janome HQ YouTube channel. I have so many videos of threading your machine, threading tips and tricks. There's a whole serger school playlist, and I talk about threads for your sergers, for example, in that serger sewing school, that serger school playlist there, and I talk about different threads for the sergers, but specifically needles. Did you know Janome needle threaders were built with Janome needles in mind? And Oregon is the company that makes Janome needles. They're a Japanese company, and they make Janome needles. And again, the little wire that comes through the eye of the needle is calibrated for a Janome size 10 needle. So if you're using a Janome size 9 needle, that it's great, it's a Janome needle, but that eye of that needle is so small, there's not enough room for the little wire to come through and grab the thread and pull it through. Conversely, if we're using this thicker, heavier thread, again, a 28 or 30 weight thread that's getting quite thick, that's too thick for that little wire to come through and grab the 2 strands of thread. So why your needle threader won't work, maybe you didn't lock the machine, maybe the needle wasn't in the highest position as it should be, or again, maybe the other brand of needle, stick to a good quality brand of needle, but maybe that other brand of needle, maybe the eye isn't in the right spot for that little wire that comes through to grab the thread. So therefore, you can still use the other brand of needle, but just it may not work with the needle threader because maybe that eye is too high and the needle threader is hitting down here, or the needle threader is hitting up here. If it's a Janome needle, we know it's going to work because that's what it was made for. Now, when we get into having to manually thread the needles, then this is where I love the Janome manual needle threader here. Comes in a blister pack from your dealer. Part of the needle threader here holds the needle, so when you want to replace it and unscrew and put the needle in, then it acts as a third hand. Really helps if you got any dexterity issues. But then here, there's a little notch that says this is the way to hold it upright, and there's a little notch, a little groove there to put your thread over. And when you run this down the shaft of the needle, this little wire pokes out, and then that'll just go right through the eye of the needle. It works so well. I've tried to demo it in lives, and it's just too fiddly to get in close. But again, it just comes out, again, lots of blogs and Janome Life, and I have demoed it in previous lives. So that little wire then forces this thread through the eye of the needle. So it works out really, really good. So this is just the manual needle threader, again, in a blister pack from your Janome dealer. Works out super good. When I talked about different threads, and oh yes, we have specific bobbin weight thread, Janome bobbin thread, either in the spool or in the cone, depending on your embroidery machine. They usually come, one or the other comes with your embroidery machine. You can get them from your Janome dealer. They are great to use in your Janome machine, or we have our pre-wounds in black and white on our Janome J bobbin. They are a 60 weight thread, and you'll see 60/2, which means it's a 2-ply thread. So again, it's a little bit thinner. We want the bobbin weight thread typically to be thinner when we're doing standard embroidery. Then again, we don't want all that extra buildup underneath. So this 60 weight thread is great. It's polyester thread, pre-wounds, great for regular sewing, great for, again, your embroidery machine, or for embroidery, again, we've got our Janome bobbin thread. And then as a very quick little review, remember in our Janome machines, we have 3 different types of bobbin holders. Now, the bobbin holders have the gram weight printed in the bottom. Now, in this case, maybe you can see 10 gram. And in most machines, there's a little red dot there. This is for my CM17, so it's different. But again, it says 10 gram. There's a little red dot. That's what I have in my 550E here. That's the standard bobbin holder that comes with all machines. When we have an embroidery machine with that 10 gram bobbin holder, if we're using our Janome bobbin thread or our pre-wound bobbins, we can use the 10 gram bobbin holder. We don't need to use the higher tension yellow dot embroidery bobbin holder that is 20 grams. We don't need to use this one if we're using Janome bobbin thread or the pre-wound bobbins there. Because again, these bobbin holders are calibrated for Janome thread. So our regular 10 grams is fine. 20 grams comes included with our embroidery machines. And again, when we're doing regular embroidery, we don't want to see the bobbin threads up at the top. So instead of having to adjust the machines so much, Janome now has these different types of bobbin holders, different gram tension. So 20 grams, there's more tension pulling that bobbin or that needle thread to the back. So you'll see here, I've got a lot of red thread on the back because of that 20-gram bobbin holder. It pulled that red thread to the back. So it's all beautiful in the front. We don't see any of our white bobbin thread up at the top, for example. And we can keep all of our pre-wound bobbins in these fabulous Janome bobbin savers, for example. 66 regular bobbins will be held in there. You can get it from your Janome dealer. So that works out great. The other bobbin holder we have is 8 grams, which is a low tension bobbin holder. It's got a little blue triangle there. That specifically is for when we are doing free motion quilting, ruler quilting, or in this case, this AccuFill quilting, where we're quilting in the embroidery hoop. I don't want to feel all those threads on the back side, you know, those needle threads on the back of my quilt. So this is where, even for our embroidery machine, we can use this low tension 8-gram bobbin holder so we don't have those needle threads pulled as much to the back side. It just makes it feel much nicer on the back, again, for our regular quilts. And where this thread, I get asked all the time, this sample, that, oh, what kind of thread? Look at the buildup of that thread. That must be a really thick thread. And even for this sample, very quickly, oh, time is my enemy. This sample, oh, again, people say, oh, wow, that must be really thick thread. Well, no, this is regular 50 weight, 40 weight thread. It's just because of the stitching. It goes back and forth several times, like a triple stitch. And same with this AccuFill quilting for these butterflies. The stitch goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So it builds it up. And it makes it look like it's a heavier thread, but it's not. It's just standard regular thread. But it's the digitizing that makes it so. And again, very quickly, if you join me tomorrow, I'm going to share, here's some beautiful metallic threads, for example. I'm going to share with you some of these projects you can make with your embroidery machine, where you're basically embroidering your fabric and then cutting it up to make projects. So yes, lots of whirlwind information as always. But again, little threading tips and tricks like that, little thread stands, again, correct needles, using the various bobbin holders. There is so much that you can do. I love when my thread makes a grand statement. Excellent. That's exactly what we can do, that we can use different threads in our machine, and specifically embroidery machine. Again, people get so locked into, oh, well, is it embroidery thread, for example? So we may say, like our Janome thread, yes, it's polyester embroidery thread. That's its intended purpose. But again, I love to free motion quilt, ruler quilt with it. Again, decorative stitches, anything that really shows it off. So we can totally use different threads, or again, cotton threads. We can totally use cotton threads in our embroidery machine. It'll just produce an entirely different look based on it's like a lower luster than the polyester. And then again, we could get into the multicolor thread, or again, metallic threads. Ooh, and our last tip about metallic threads, read our Janome Life blog. Our fabulous educator Celine has done a lot of lives and blogs about metallic threads in particular. We want to use that thread stand, Janome thread stand, the thread net over the spool of thread. Slow our embroidery machine down. If we are doing regular sewing with metallic, slow the machine down, and Janome purple tip needle with that extra big flared cobra head that help separate the fibers of the fabric. So then the needle thread and bobbin thread can intersect more readily. You'll get way less thread breakage when you slow the machine down and use the Janome purple tip needle with the metallic threads. I embroidered all this and no thread breaks at all. It was good. So that little recipe, and again, lots of Janome life blogs and videos on our respective YouTube channels. And yes, my Machinger gloves, I've cut my fingers really bad. And so I've been having Band-Aids on for a while. So I thought I'll just wear my Machinger gloves, which I use for free motion quilting and ruler quilting. But then that way you don't all have to stare at Band-Aids anymore. So yes, thank you everyone as usual. Wow, I went over my time, but so much information. So again, follow our Janome Life blog and back to respective lives. I know Anne Hine recently did some lives about thread as well. So definitely check it out. Lots of information there, and double check what threads that your Janome dealer has. So thank you everyone so much for joining me. I hope to see you all tomorrow. Have a fabulous day. Bye.